We're live now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Ordinary Council meeting. Greater Shepparton City Council supports the current public health requirement, ensuring that our employees and councillors wear face coverings. Wearing a face covering helps prevent the spread of coronavirus, and wearing a face covering provides an additional physical barrier and helps to reduce community transmission. However, for the purposes of conducting this council meeting in accordance with our virtual meeting procedure, I will be removing my mask to allow for clear hearing and visibility. Thank you. So I'll refer to our agenda for this evening. I'll start with the acknowledgement. We, the Greater Shepparton City Council, begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, which now comprises Greater Shepparton. We pay respect to their tribal elders, we celebrate their continuing culture, and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. Item number 2 is privacy note. This public meeting is being streamed live via our Facebook page and made available for public access on our website, along with the official minutes of this meeting. Number 3, governance principles. Council considers that the recommendations contained in this agenda give effect to the overarching governance principles stated in Section 9(2) of the Local Government Act 2020. These principles are stated here on page 6. I wouldn't read all of them. I'll move on to item number 4, apologies. Nil received. Item number 5, declarations of conflict of interest. Councillors, do we have any declaration of conflict of interest today with respect to the agenda? No? Thank you. Item number 6, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, are there any comments around the meeting minutes from last month? Yes, Councillor Hazelman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in reference to item 10.6 of the minutes, which is about the adoption of the Shepparton Route and the 3050 Regional City Growth Plan, the motion that was moved by Councillor Adam refers to that the matter lay on the table, when the motion should read that the motion lay on the table. And that's got implications, obviously, for item 10.4 of this agenda.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Are there any other comments or clarification with regards to the meeting minutes? None. Do I have a mover for this motion? A mover, Councillor Adam.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll move that the minutes of the 21st of July 2020 council meeting as circulated be confirmed.
As amended?
As amended, yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Patterson.
I'll second that recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We'll now go to the board. Those in favour? Motion carried and opposed. Moving on to item number 7, public question time. Nil received today.
Correct.
Thank you. Next is item 8.1, required changes to Section 86 committees of management under the Local Government Act 2020. Councillors, there's a recommendation on page 8 and 9. Continuing on to page number 9. Do I have a mover? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to move item 8.1 on page 8, required changes of Section 86 committees of the management under Local Government Act 2020. The recommendation is number 1, that the council revokes the instruments of delegation that were established under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 1989 for the following special committees as of the 1st of September 2020. There is 17 listed there, so I won't read those out. Point 2, establishes community asset committees pursuant to Section 65 of the Local Government Act 2020 for the following community assets. And point 3, transfer all membership of the existing special committees across to the corresponding newly established Community Asset Committee, maintaining current membership's terms until such time that there are new guidelines in place.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Eden.
I'll second the motion, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Delegations that have been made under the Local Government Act remain in force until the 1st of September 2020. Therefore, any existing committees operating under delegation will not have the power to exercise these delegations after this date until new committees are established. So currently the guidelines from Local Government Victoria for community asset committees are in a draft form, and we are now looking at transferring those over.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Eden, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't think I can add too much more to that, but this is obviously a transition from the old Act to the new Act, and that's basically it. The previous Section 86 committees have been transformed into community asset committees, and I'm sure the same people will be doing the same work with the same passion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eden. Does anyone want to speak against the motion? Does anyone want to speak for the motion? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Next is item 8.2 on page 14. LGBTI plus committee policy, financial and resourcing implications. So there's a recommendation on page 14. Would any councillor like to move a motion, please? Councillor Summer. You're on mute, Councillor Summer.
Yeah, got it. Thanks.
Yeah.
I'd like to move that the council, 1, note the report outlining the policy, financial and resourcing implications of establishing a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex and other sexuality, sex and gender diverse LGBTI plus committee, and 2, undertake further work to establish a committee.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Eden.
I'll second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Pleased we've got some movement here. It has been a long time coming, but there has been work going on in the background as usual. LGBTI plus advocates have been working tirelessly for many years to correct the social disadvantage in the LGBTI plus community and create a safe space in Greater Shepparton for people to thrive. They advocated strongly for council support in the marriage equality debate, and they succeeded. I remember buying this mug, GV Pride, at the time. Many of the statistics listed in the report are quite old. They're from 2014 and 2016. So the social disadvantage could be understated or overstated. We're not entirely sure. But rather than wait for census data, this committee will help us understand what's going on in real time so we can be informed of the important issues that this community faces. There could be an increase in people who identify as LGBTI plus since the marriage equality was legalised, and I'd be interested in that. We already work closely with these groups and listen to the input. However, sometimes inclusive decisions are made retrospectively, like the Fraser Street toilets wouldn't have had necessarily a unisex or whatever terminology is used, cubicle, but GV Pride, I think, spoke up about that, and we've managed to include it. Our language in some of our policy does appear quite binary at times, so this group could peruse our proposed policy and just make sure that we're on point when it comes to the right language, which is ever changing. It's a dynamic space, and regional areas often lag behind Metro when it comes to supporting marginalised groups such as this, but establishing a council committee will help us stay in the front foot of emerging issues. I hope it can inform a council submission toward the Victorian LGBTI plus strategy that's set to be released by the state government in 2021. And I hope it can inform our own gender equality strategy and action plan, which is set to be released in the same year. I'm incredibly proud of what the LGBTI plus community has already been able to achieve, and I hope with council's support they can facilitate even better outcomes to reduce disadvantage once the committee's formed. So I'm all for it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Summer. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to support this motion. As Councillor Summer alluded to, there has been work going on behind the scenes for quite a while. However, when it's documented in a motion and voted on, it seems to give it more teeth or more veracity. So I'm happy to support it, and I hope it gives us a good conduit into that community and make us aware of any concerns that they may have, or any help or assistance, or anything that we can help them with. I think they're a great, huge part of our community, and we need to be supporting this. Well, I say minority, but maybe not as much as I think, as much as any other group. So I'm happy to support the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor, okay.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I just also want to acknowledge the great work that's being done across the community. There's certainly, a collaborative approach as we speak. This is going to enforce council's commitment to improvement in this space, but also making sure that, we have strong equality, and that we also have strong connections to all pockets of community, but that we are very united. I think that's the really good message here, is that we can do things better ourselves. And it's like any committee, come to us so we can improve, we can work together better, and just, a big thank you to a lot of the work that is already being done in the community, supporting people and making sure that, people feel welcomed and embraced and the same as everybody else. As we know, that's exactly what should happen, and that I feel does happen, but there's always room for improvement, and this committee will enforce our messaging to the community, and working together is always, a great thing, things we can do better. So really support this.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kay. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? No? All right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, motion carried unopposed. Moving on to our next item, which is on page number 20, item 9.1. Contracts awarded under delegation July 2020. So there's a recommendation on page 20. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Giovanetti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation on page 20. It states, Council note, contracts awarded under delegated authority by Director, contracts awarded under delegated authority by Manager, and requests for tenders advertised but not yet awarded.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Oraswari. Thank you.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll second the recommendation as put by Councillor Giovanetti.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Giovanetti, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We don't appear to have as many contracts out at the moment as what we have in past months, but obviously that's because we're at the start of the financial year and there's a lot of preparatory work that's going on before contracts are let out. But it is very pleasing to see that we have let a number of contracts in the past month. Watt Road Bridge Maripna repair works, that was $141,000. Designated area migration agreement, $79,500, where we are working with other councils to investigate further this area migration system for employment for people in our area. And I think one of the ones that Councillor Oraswari will be very happy about is the detailed design work for Princess Park Pavilion, which is very much needed at this present time. There are a number of other contracts that have been put out for tender but haven't been awarded as yet, so I won't go into those at this particular point in time.
Thank you, Councillor Giovanetti. Councillor Oraswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I'd just like to thank Councillor Giovanetti for pointing out that one in relation to Princess Park. It's taken almost 8 years, but better late than never. And I think that Princess Park is well on the way, ultimately, a few years down the track, to really be a place where a lot of people will be able to utilise the facilities there. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Patterson?
Just quickly, Madam Mayor, it's a good example of how the delegation works. The Watt Street Bridge contract has officially been ticked off tonight, but the job's nearly complete. It's been going now for about 4 to 5 weeks, and hopefully it'll be finished in the next week, which would be a great relief to the residents of Mooroopna and a lot in Shepparton, I can tell you. And over in our contracts yet to be awarded, one of my favourite events is the Fry Street Food Festival, which is up again this year or next year. And I, like everyone else, hope this terrible virus is over so we can go ahead this year. I think we're all suffering in some way, and this is a great event, and hopefully we'll get the all clear to run the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? All right, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. So the next item is 9.2 on page 23, Councillor Expenses Policy and Councillor Resources Policy. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Giovanetti. You're on mute. Could you please unmute? Thank you.
Sorry, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation on page 23 that the council adopt the councillor expense policy 37.POL 3 and adopt the councillor resources and facilities policy 37.POL 17 with the addition on item 2.6 in that policy that relates to the information and communication technology expenses. I would like to have added that where we have an iPad or similar tablet device, I would like to add a laptop computer and a mobile phone. And then moving on to 3, revoke the council expenses and entitlements policy, which was previously adopted by council on the 17th September 2019, and rescind the notice of motion resolved by council on the 1st of April 2015, titled Confidential Notice of Motion 4/2015, noting that the subject matter is now addressed in the councillor expense policy 37.POL 3.
Thank you, Councillor Giovanetti. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Iswari.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I second the recommendation as the motion now.
Thank you. Councillor Giovanetti, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a procedural motion, effectively. Outlining what our councillor expenses policy is, which is, I don't think is varied from last year. I've added the laptop computer for councillors because it has been discussed by councillors that during the COVID-19 period, it's been very difficult to operate effectively with just an iPad, particularly with a lot of the Zoom meetings we have. And councillors have indicated that it would be beneficial to have a laptop computer as well. And as this, I would imagine, would be for the new council coming in, won't affect me. So therefore, I've moved the motion so that the other councillors can get the benefit from it.
Thank you, Councillor Giovanetti. Councillor Iswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yes, look, I wholeheartedly support the commentary by Councillor Giovanetti in relation to the inclusion of a laptop. From my own experience, I find that the iPad has been barely adequate, and given the fact that we're now moving ahead at light speed in terms of the way we conduct business with the advent of COVID, I think even with the advent of a laptop, I think there'll be something further down the track in terms of how to make us work in a much more efficient and cohesive environment. And I think it's a great idea. And as per his comments about the rest of the notice of motion, I don't propose to add anything to it.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Hazelman?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I would fully support the motion. In fact, through this COVID environment, I've been utilising laptop and an iPad to complement one another. It certainly makes life a lot better, and you're a lot more effective and efficient in the way you go. The amount of Zoom meetings where I've been in, where people have been trying to, on an iPad, to monitor the meeting and monitor an agenda on the one device, it just, yeah, it's ludicrous. So totally support the motion.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Summer? Yeah. Could you please unmute yourself?
Unmute. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Giving the example of what happened just before this meeting, my iPad wouldn't connect. So I'm actually on my personal laptop and I had 5 minutes to spare before the meeting started. So it's always nice to have some kind of backup. I'd always prefer hard copies and writing things down because technology can be fallible, and this just gives us that backup. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, you wanted to speak to the motion?
I'm just personally hoping that the technology will include an automatic mute button next year. Meetings, believe me. And a lot of people waving to one another and thumbs up, thumbs down, etc. The technology will be there, no doubt.
All right, is that all? Thank you. Would any other councillor want to speak to the motion? No? All right, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Next, we have item 9.3. All right, yeah. 9.3 on page 26. July 2020 monthly financial report. There's a recommendation on page 26. Would any councillor like to move a motion? Yes, Councillor Hazelman.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Mayor. I will move that the council receive and note the July 2020 monthly financial report.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Patterson.
I'll second that recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I probably should apologise to Councillor Patterson. I've jumped into his favourite item. There's really nothing to be stated. This is the report that's incorporated into every council agenda. Our financial though performance here is for the first month ended the 31st of July. So there is very little, if anything at all, to report in terms of the report itself. Virtually just states what our adopted budget is, proposed operating surplus, proposed expenditure, and our capital works program.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Hazelman said, it's very early in the year. Where we end up this year with the COVID virus, it's a very difficult year for running finances and looking after finances, but so far so good. One thing I'd like to make everyone aware, it's a councillor's favourite time of year where the rate notices are going out this week. So we'll all be excited to receive a few calls with that, I can guarantee you. But I'd like just to remind ratepayers that if they're having any difficulty at all with their rate notice, if they're having trouble making the commitments when it does come along, please contact our rates department. We are very flexible. We're governed by legislation. We have to pursue our rates, but we're more than happy, and I'm sure I'm speaking for every council, we're more than happy to go to the extremes to make sure that everyone can fulfil their obligation. It doesn't have to be as a bulk check up front. There's several different options to pursue. And if you can't even pursue all those options, please don't sit there in silence. Contact our rate department and we can work something out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Do you have to say something?
I think it's okay now.
Yeah, it's okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Does anyone want to speak against the motion? No? Okay. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Yes, Councillor Summer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just on rates, it would be nice to get some modelling on a 0% rate rise next year when the budget comes along. Just flagging that, because that's always an option. But I wanted to draw some attention to materials and services. It's so variable all the time. It goes up and down by $1 million. It's hard to keep track, but that could be an area where we might want to stabilise movements. Other than that, it's for noting, so it is what it is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would anyone else want to speak to the motion? No? All right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Next is item number 9.4, review of investment and cash management policy. There's a recommendation on page 28. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Summer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that the council adopt the investment and cash management policy 34.POL1.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Orisvari.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I second the recommendation as the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think this is a bit of a game changer and sign of the times, and it's quite significant as a matter of fact. The changes that we've made allow us to divest funding away from fossil fuel industries and towards sustainable authorised deposit taking institutions, which is a new word for me. We just call it an ADI. Tight guidelines ensure that this is a low risk to council, but it does send a clear message of leadership in regards to what we consider to be a climate emergency. We've moved on that. So we're acting on that. And councils do have significant investment power, and we do have a responsibility to invest responsibly. Sustainable ADIs will ensure a better future for the next generation. It might be a small step for our individual council, but collectively, this sort of initiative has the power to shift our economy and lead into a 2030 zero carbon emission target plan. I was a little surprised that an annual investment performance report wasn't already being presented to the executive leadership team, but through this, it will be now. I'm also very pleased that we're still investing up to $2 million with GV Credit Union and $2 million with branch of Bendigo Bank, Shepparton branch of Bendigo Bank each year. So I'm more than comfortable with this. It's a big step, but times are changing and we have to move with them.
Thank you very much, Councillor Summer. Councillor Orisvari, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Adam?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like just to carry on from Councillor Summer's comments. I think it's a good motion and I support it entirely. I just want to draw everyone's attention to the fact that when we moved the climate emergency resolution many, many months ago, there was some concern about how will this affect our ongoing financial situation. Well, this policy is obviously very sensible in the sense that, and I'll point you to one of the points that the revised policy achieves this by giving preference to ADIs that do not fund fossil fuel projects, but there's some conditions on that where the rate of investment is greater than, equal to, or within 10 basis points of other investments available at the time. So even with the climate emergency considerations, we're not going off and causing financial pain to ourselves. We're trying to find a good balance of reliable investments as well as addressing the fossil fuel industry or not addressing them. So I think it's a good balance, this policy, and I fully endorse it.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Does any other councillor want to speak to the motion? Councillor Patterson.
Just quickly, Madam Mayor, I can imagine there's ratepayers sitting back there thinking, how much has council got stuck away that they're investing all this money? But it's all individual particular accounts. I'll give you a couple of quick examples. The sale yards, they recoup money from the sales of the sale yards, and that money is kept in a particular account for sale yards, and it's used, as you'll see later on, for project work at the sale yards. There's developer contribution funds that developers pay up for work to be done in developments on developing basically areas for housing, etc. There's lots and lots of different funds, and we keep all them separate in separate accounts so we know exactly where they are. So we haven't got a big heap of money stuck away. We don't know what it's for. It's all there for its particular cause. And I support the other councillors. This is a leadership role we're playing here. It makes very little difference to the financial income of the council, but it is a leadership lead we're taking to present with this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? No? All right. So we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Osvari, did I see your hand? No. Okay. All good. All in favour. Motion carried. Unopposed. Thank you. Right. Right. So the next item is item number 9.5, Audit and Risk Management Committee Charter. On page 32, there's a recommendation. Would any councillor like to move a motion? Yes, Councillor Hazelman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move that the council adopt the Audit and Risk Management Committee Charter.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Giovannetti. Thank you. You're on mute.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. I'd like to second that motion.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, the committee charter, it's a component requirement of the Local Government Act, and it's been based on a model audit and risk committee charter developed by Local Government Victoria. The charter itself has been extensively reviewed by the committee, and in particular, chair of the committee, Mr. John Collegiate. So it's been backwards and forwards a number of times. The comments have been incorporated, and I would commend the charter to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Councillor Giovannetti, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Hazelman's adequately covered it.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay, so now we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Next is item 9.6, award of contract 1942, provision of office catering services. There's a recommendation on page 35. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the motion that the award of contract 1942, provision of office catering services. The recommendation is that the council, I can read it out if you like. Number one, accept the tenders submitted for contract 1942, provision of office catering services, panel of supplies from 3 tenders that we actually, I won't read the whole recommendation out, but I'll read that first little bit, that we've actually had 3 suppliers come through.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Summer. Do you want to second? Do you want to say so? You're on mute.
Apologies. Yes, I'd please like to second.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you. Look, it's possibly, not going to have a lot of business at the moment with not much happening at the office at this point of time, but time will move forward and this obviously will happen in the future. We'll be back to having some office catering, but it is great to see that the 3 tenders that came in have all been given a contract, which is great, and they're all great businesses. And at the moment, we're certainly wanting to support as many businesses as possible, and I certainly do a shout out to the community to do the same and to support all business. But yeah, look, great business, great tenders, 3 of them local, as we would expect for local catering. But as we said, it's obviously going to be fairly quiet times for a little while until we come out of this COVID situation. But thank you for those tenderers, and we certainly will look forward to having them support council catering.
Thank you, Councillor Kay. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well said, Councillor O'Keefe. It is great food, and I believe most of these are local businesses. Probably all of them are local businesses. Can I just clarify, are they? I know 2 are for sure.
Yep, they're all local.
Yeah. Yes, they are.
Good.
So we often require catering for high levels of government we visit, and out of town events. We want to make a good impression. We need to ensure that the food matches the service and the experience of Greater Shepparton. So it's likely that the projected cost of this is going to be a lot lower, just owing to the COVID restrictions, as Councillor O'Keefe said. But it is a conservative estimate, just so we're not over budget. Having tried 2 of these companies before, not the third, I'm sure that they will impress, and hopefully there's an opportunity to sample what's on offer soon.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Okay. Would anyone like to speak for the motion? All right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay, motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Moving on to item 9.7. Governance rules and public transparency policy. There's a recommendation on page 39. Would a councillor please move a motion? Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I'd like to move the recommendation on page 39 that the council having, I will read it out, it's not that long, that the council having considered the submission received during the community engagement process for its draft governance rules, including the incorporated election period policy developed under Section 60 of the Local Government Act 2020, adopts the governance rules in the form attached to this report. Point 2, having noted that no submissions are received during the community engagement process for its draft public transparency policy, adopt the public transparency policy in the form attached to this report. And point 3 notes that the governance rules and public transparency policy as adopted will commence operation from September 1, 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Aswari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I second the recommendation as a motion put by Councillor Adam.
Thank you. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just very briefly, look, this is another requirement under the new Act that we have to make changes to or adopt. So we have not great changes. As I said earlier, there's only been one submission to this whole engagement policy that shows how much people sometimes don't care about how transparent we may be. But that should be I would have thought it would have been a very interesting and engagement event, but obviously no. But anyway, it is what it is. We're adopting it now, and it'll take effect from the 1st of September.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Councillor Aswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Madam Mayor. It's been covered.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? No? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Yes, Councillor Summer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to thank the sole submitter for her very detailed submission. It was a thoughtful response, actually, and each of her points have been addressed very clearly, being the only submitter that was able to happen. That was a terrific example of how public engagement can make a difference. If it was up to me alone, I would accept each of her points because I thought they were very sound. But as it stands, some of those points were deemed to be outside the scope of governance rules, and indeed we are acting in those ways, but it doesn't necessarily need to be formalised in a document. One important change that she's made is that public questions can now be addressed if the person is asking the question in attendance virtually. They don't physically have to be in a meeting necessarily. And it also provides an opportunity for us to remind the public that questions are now being read at the beginning of the meeting, so they don't have to be bored to death for an hour before they get a response, which we have implemented prior, but that was another one of her suggestions that we can reiterate that we're already doing. So thank you, submitter, for being engaged and following correct process to be heard.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? No, all right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Okay, so now moving on to item 9.8 on page 43. Revoking of Shepparton Show Committee in response to the changes to Section 86 Committee of Management under the Local Government Act 2020. There's a recommendation on page 43. Would any councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Aswari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity. The recommendation on page 43 of the council revokes the instrument of delegation that was established under Section 86 of the Local Government Act 89 for Shepparton Show Me as of the 1st of September 2020.
Thank you. Thank you. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Hazelman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm happy to second the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Aswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Madam Mayor. This is another example where the Local Government Act 2020, Section 86 special committees no longer form part of the Act. As a result, those committees and their delegated powers need to be formally revoked by this council, and that's what we're doing here today. And committees need to take an alternative form if they're going to continue to operate going forward. And the new Act only specifies 3 types of committees which can be established: a delegated committee, a community asset committee, an audit and risk committee. None of those are any of the types of committees that Shepparton Show Me will be able to operate under as it used to. And henceforth, that's why the recommendation has been put forward. But one thing that must be said is that I'm very heartened by the fact that this council is still committed to the notion of maintaining that level of expertise that the Shepparton Show Me Committee has brought to this community over a period of 20 plus years. Having been on this committee for the last 8 years, I can attest to the dedication, the enthusiasm, the passion and the support for each other that these committee members have endeavoured to bring far-ranging successful campaigns, support a myriad of functions and events around the community. And I congratulate all those that were involved with the original Shepparton Show Me, and I hope that they continue to do so going forward. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aswari. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, Madam Mayor. Councillor Aswari covered it very well.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? No, all right. So we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Next is item 10.1 on page 47. Consideration of the Golden Murray Resilience Strategy 2020. There's a recommendation on page 47. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Patterson.
I'd like to move the motion on the other recommendation on page 47. I'll read it out. The council supports the Golden Murray Resilience Strategy 2020 and advocates for priority intervention listed in the Golden Murray Resilience Strategy 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Summer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd love to second that.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, this is a document where council have really got on the front foot. The GMID, which is the Golden Murray Irrigation District, is the biggest irrigation area in Australia. We've got about 16,000 irrigators, or 1,600 irrigators. We produce about $1.6 million worth of produce per year. There's been an enormous amount of pressure put on what we've been doing for a long time through climate change and less water coming from the heavens. The Murray-Darling Basin Plan, there's a lot of water now being transferred out of the region, which has meant we've had an overall loss of around 50% of our irrigation water, which is a very major impact on our ratepayers and our whole region. A lot of people that aren't employed on farms are still employed in factories processing milk, fruit, etc. So it's very important that we address this. So to the credit of the people involved here, they've got together and they've formed a strategy. We're on the front foot. We're looking at different ways we can produce food. We're looking at different ways we can use water. There's lots can be done, and it's important we're on the front foot and doing it, and that's what this document's about. So I highly recommend it, and I'm sure it'll get support from our region, our fellow councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It was a pleasure to read the document. The way it was formatted, it was quite simple, very futuristic outlook, innovative. I was very pleased to see some reference there to traditional Indigenous farming practices, which I thought was great. Greater Shepparton has always been a very resilient community. We've worked hard through adversity to establish ourselves as a regional city. We are the definition of droughts and flooding plains, really, and we're often at the mercy of international markets. So that hasn't helped when the Australian dollar keeps going up and down. But despite all that, we keep our heads held high. There's a lot of pride in this region, and we want it to stay that way. But with all the changes in the world, there's never been a better time to have a resilience strategy. I've never heard of this before. It's so high level. It's just great. Unprecedented, uncertain times. And yes, as Councillor Patterson said, it certainly does put us on the front foot. I really endorse the resilience principles. And I'm going to get a bit esoteric here, but perhaps it's missing one element, which is that notion of reduction. I think perhaps we can be making the best of a simple life, not building large things. We could be doing more with less and living within our means. It's that reaching out to support our neighbours during hardship so that we can all get through together. The focus in this document is about shifting the economy and keeping it afloat, which is fantastic, but perhaps we need to look beyond profits in other areas or in this future reversing of the strategy and look towards our own personal values, because it's individuals that make up a community resilience package. So that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Summer. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Okay. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Adam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, as Councillor Summer indicated, this is a very complex and very modern document, I would suggest, dealing with what's happening now into the future. One could almost say I think it connects very well with our rural land use strategy, in the sense that this is, to a degree, what I've been calling for a while. This is almost a review of that strategy. It fits in so well with it. It's not entirely that strategy, but it can feed into, if we ever do review that other strategy I mentioned, I think this would be a great document to refer to, because it has many changes and considerations that have been considered for 10 or so years with the other documents. So, yeah, I fully support it, and hopefully it can form part of our future review of the rural land use strategy, which we only discussed about 2 or 3 weeks ago with our 2 other partner councils. So, yeah, good, I support it. Fantastic.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would anyone else want to speak to the motion? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Aswari, I can't see your hand. Thank you. Motion carried unopposed. Next is item 10.2 on page 52, establishment of a Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Reference Group. There's a recommendation on page 52. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation that the Council, number 1, authorise the formation of the Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Reference Group in accordance with the proposed terms of reference. Point 2, adopt the terms of reference for the Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Group. Point 3, nominate the Mayor to serve on the Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Reference Group. And point 4, note that the council officers will undertake an expression of interest process to invite nominations on the Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Reference Group in accordance with the terms of reference.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Summer?
Happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is a really exciting and positive reference group that we're setting up. I think it's such a great flow on from our affordable housing strategy. Getting community leaders, community representatives to actually help us work through affordable housing and homelessness within our community is what we should be doing. So I'm very, very excited and proud to see this happen. Council certainly plays such a strong role in the community, and we need to be collaborating with many people across the community, as it suggests in the report, that we can work together to work on this extremely difficult and hard process to really make sure that we can, house people, we can look after the homeless. We state that all members of the Greater Shepparton community have access to safe, affordable and appropriate housing in this document. So how do we make that happen? So it's really pleasing to see those people listed as far as, we've got Beyond Housing on board. We know do an incredible job across the community. Department of Health and Human Services, the Bridge Youth Services. There's St Vincent's de Paul, Rumballara Ethnic Council. We need to be connecting to all of those people that connect to this issue and that actually work on the ground with it so that we get the information we need, that we can help really support and make a difference. It's close to my heart, as you all know, and we need to, as we say, look after all people. No one should be homeless, and our statistics are alarming. So it's exciting to think that we are still pushing through, and now we're going to have this great committee, if you like, that's going to see what we can achieve moving forward, what we need to do, and then we need to action those things to get the results we need. So very, very happy to see this and very supportive of it, obviously. So it's great work, and I can't wait to see what we can achieve amongst our community.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. Just in support of Councillor O'Keefe. She has embraced this issue wholeheartedly. She's walked the walk, done her own fundraising, raising awareness, reached out to people in need when they didn't have anybody. So councillors really do care. I'd love for the Mayor to also have a right to speak on this issue, because I know that Councillor Abdullah, you've been very active in trying to get the establishment of affordable housing on the agenda in terms of COVID recovery efforts across the whole region, and I thank you for that. It is an amazing thing that's happening here that we haven't traditionally had the teeth to do. Despite being one of the most disadvantaged regions when it comes to housing security, we are the most overlooked. Being a safe seat, ministers don't necessarily prioritise funding to these social issues, although we did receive funding for this plan through DELP, which is great. Recent changes to the Act have allowed us to take the lead somewhat, which is amazing, and we are grabbing that opportunity to make positive change, as is evidenced in this motion. The working group of experts will pool existing knowledge, as Councillor O'Keefe said. We'll get ideas to ensure that every person has access to safe, affordable and appropriate housing. That is a fundamental human right. You cannot participate meaningfully in society if you do not have a roof over your head. That is beyond disadvantage. That is out of the ball game. But the most important point here is that it must result in outcomes. The person living near the river, in their car or bed hopping between friends, they don't really care if people are discussing this. What they want are results. They want access to clean housing, secure housing, so that they can meaningfully contribute to the community. And there's not that negative flow on from people who are resorting to desperate actions, who may not make the best choices when they're in desperate situations. So I think overall it can only benefit our community, and I'm just so proud of each councillor for doing their bit.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Okay, would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Adam?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I agree with everything Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor Summer said. However, I think this is great. We keep saying it's a first step. Well, it's not. There's been many first steps over the decades in respect to this matter. But as Councillor Summers said, we need action. Now, for the formation of this affordable housing reference group will no doubt, they haven't got any authorisation as such or any real power. They're there to, as a conduit to council, to make us aware of what needs to be done, when it needs to be done. And council's power, I suppose, in this environment is really planning to a degree. How can we, I won't say, how can we support these projects through our planning department? Now, sometimes that means that we have to be a little bit more creative in how we can find land, because I think one of the biggest problems is for a lot of these groups who have the funds to build houses for the homeless is finding land, and then getting objections from the surrounding residents about these types of homes. Well, I think that we have to align our planning recommendations or advice a little bit tougher, in the sense that we should give preference to this type of housing to a degree over normal housing, because without that assistance, this is all great, but nothing actually happens at the end, because we get muddled up and get tangled up in VCAT and all sorts of different things, especially with the larger projects. So I hope council can actually really do something positive in respect to assisting these types of projects that will be no doubt conducted by these organisations. We need results. We need people in homes. That requires money. It requires council planning departments to be a little bit creative, not so much creative, but to be supportive to the absolute 10th degree. So that's what I'm hoping this will come from this. But as I say, a good start, but I don't want to be discussing this in 12 months' time and seeing no results from it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? Okay. I'll just make my some comments around this, and really appreciate the passion that is existing here, and agree and endorse all the comments that you have made, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Summer and Councillor Adam. As we know that this Greater Shepparton affordable housing strategy is really a very significant step in making sure that now council has a plan framework, and there are many actions that have been outlined as a part of this strategy, and forming this reference group is just one of those actions. However, this is a very important action, because it is going to bring together, as Councillor O'Keefe has noted, all the community organizations and relevant stakeholders together, and together we can identify those barriers and work together and make sure that the relevant projects are initiated and are implemented. So it's again that collaborative leadership approach that the council has taken here, and personally I'm very pleased, and I really hope that at the end of the day, as Councillor Adam has noted, we need more houses, we need more social housing, we need more affordable housing to resolve this problem of homelessness. And homelessness is, of course, more than just rough sleeping. It's about people who are couch surfing, who are sleeping in the caravan parks or in their cars. So Greater Shepparton has to be a livable region, and the livability indicator is one of the important indicators is the affordable housing, whether people have safe and secure houses or not. So definitely now it's on our agenda, it's on the radar, and it will happen. Thank you. With that, you'll go for the vote. Those in favour? Okay. Motion carried unopposed. Now, moving on to next item, which is 10.3, car parking on Fraser Street, Shepparton, page number 58. Would any councillor like to move a motion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move a motion that the council note that the Fraser Street West Walk car park was considered to be designated paid timed on-street car park at the time the parking strategy was presented to council in April 2020. I'd also like to add, notwithstanding that report, that council resolves that Fraser Street West Walk car park now be considered as an off-street car park without parking fees and subject to time limits as currently defined.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sutton.
Yes, I would like to second that motion. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
have to get it back from the,
Thank you, Councillor Sutton.
don't have it all written down as such.
Thank you. Do you want Councillor O'Keefe to repeat?
No, I'll get that from the recording.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to point out that I appreciate this report being done, and there has, as we know, there has been some confusion around this car park. I'm pleased, to have this conversation to really acknowledge that as a car park, in my eyes, it should have been included in the recent free parking initiative, off-street car parking initiative. So I would certainly like to see this put through tonight, and I think it would certainly be something moving forward that would be certainly agreed upon and appreciated by everyone, I would say, across the community.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Sutton, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think the West Walk car park should be considered as an off-street car park and should be free timed as per other off-street car parks in the CBD. The car park is considered to be an off-street car park by the community as it has been designated as a car park for many years. It has a car park sign at the entrance and was listed on the council website as an off-street car park. And as there is no financial implication to the budget, it should now be specified as a no-fee timed off-street car park.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Summer?
I'm sorry to do this. Every inch of me wants to support this motion, but strategically, I find it hard to do. So I'm going to be the bad guy here and just explain why. I think we need to stick to the strategy, the idea of making off-street parking free to redirect traffic and stop congestion. And in my heart, I believe that this will succeed. But in order to encourage walking and stimulate the economy through window shopping, we do need to prioritise pedestrians more so than cars. Now, we're already opening up the mall to traffic, so there's already going to be quite a few cars in there. It's a busy street. We already know through studies that 30% of congestion is from people driving around the block looking for that perfect park, and that kind of behaviour can make or break a relaxed shopping experience. We have plenty of off-street parking right now. So it may not technically be a through road street, but it is in the middle of a busy shopping area. I can never get a park in there right now, and I think it should be dominated by foot traffic because cars can't buy clothes or anything really. We can always revisit this in future if data suggests that it's not working, and that's great. But I do think we need to give that strategy a chance of success because it's not located in a traditionally off-street, off-centre, away from the activity type of location. What I do take issue with, though, is the report that council presented to us, which was interesting because, if I can find it, yeah, where is it? Sorry. The report said that, yeah, the inclusion or exclusion of Fraser Street was discussed with both councillors and the parking reference group, which includes members of the Shepparton Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Now, to my recollection and to others' recollection, Fraser Street was never specifically discussed. It might have been in the report. And if it was discussed, there might not have been so much confusion leading up to council staff labelling that car park as free. There obviously is confusion there. We seemingly changed our minds after we began that process, so I apologise to the community for any disadvantage that might have given them. Look, the whole thing is convoluted. I'm just a little bit upset that it's gotten to this point. I wish I could vote to keep it free, but I think it would be counterproductive in terms of what we're trying to do, which is reduce congestion. So I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Hazelman.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was a bit torn on this one, really, when I looked at it from the previous report we saw. But based on that April report, we now know that if this becomes a free car park, there is no financial detriment to the council. And as others have said, many in the community had already assumed it was off-street car parking, and this will remove that confusion. The future redevelopment of the Mall could see, though, most of this car parking could well disappear. The town square concept favoured by many will occupy a fair proportion of this area. So it being a car park might only be a short-term solution anyway. On the negative side, this is what it really does concern me, and based on the experience down at Nixon and Maud Street, where we provided all-day car parking for free, that was just consumed by the workers immediately. And that became a problem, forcing us to review the time limits there. In previous trials of free car parking, the same thing has happened in this area. It's a prime location, and one of the challenges will be, when it does become free, how do we make it available for shoppers? The reality is that we'll have a real task to keep local workers out of those car parks. That will be a challenge, and it needs to be monitored, and if necessary, the situation reviewed.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Giovanetti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I go back to our early original discussions about free timed car parking, and it was never council's intention, right from the word go, to make parks in prime locations that were already fully occupied, to have them as free time parking. It was always the intent to have the areas outside the effective CBD area to have the free time parking. So I agree with Councillor Hazelman in so much as I think that if we do agree with this motion, what's going to happen is people who work in that particular area are going to be playing musical chairs every couple of hours if the first 2 hours are free. I can't see shoppers gaining any advantage out of this at all.
Thank you, Councillor Giovanetti. Would any councillor like to speak against for the motion? Okay, would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think it'd be a disaster for the CBD to make these parks free. Their figures show that they're most utilised parks in the CBD at present. At lunchtime on any given day, there's 100% take-up. So by making them free, you don't get an extra car in there. What you do is look at who's actually utilising those parks. And I agree with a few of the other councillors that said it'll be musical cars. There'll be people heading there first up every time, trying to get a park. They won't be able to get a park. And it is just a disaster as a park as it is. You basically enter over a walkway across the road. There's no way through. A lot of blocks you can drive round and round, but if you get in there and there's no parks, it's very, very inconvenient to have to back up and get out of there. I note that the Warrnambool Council at the invitation of the Warrnambool Chamber of Council decided to make their parking free. They thought it'd be a good incentive during COVID to get people coming to town to park. And approximately 3 weeks later, the same Chamber of Commerce contacted the council and wanted revoked. The staff were parking there all day. They were shifting their cars every 2 hours. And when legitimate shoppers come into town, they couldn't get a park. And it had a detrimental effect on their CBD. I see this as the same case. These are the prime parks in our CBD. They're going to be free and they're going to be taken up with people that are going to be getting to work late, jumping in there, parking, coming out after 2 hours, changing their car from one side to the other. Again, after lunch, I'll be doing the same thing. They won't be available to shoppers. And that is my great concern. It'll have a detrimental effect on the CBD. I thought it would help the CBD, I'd be totally supportive of it, but I don't believe it will be.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Would anyone else like to speak for the motion? Councillor Aswari.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've listened with interest to the back and forth in relation to this, and there are some good points for and against, but ultimately, I suppose from my perspective, it comes down to at least trying it in the first instance, relying upon the fact that it's going to be actively monitored. And with anything to do with these parking spaces, if as Councillor Patterson has indicated, people come to the council and say, listen, this is just clearly a disaster, we can always revert it back. I understand that's just a balance, but in the case of this particular matter, I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Before I go move forward, I would like to invite our CEO, Mr. Peter Harriott, to clarify around this point that was just made on about the budget impact. Would you please do that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's important because one of the governance principles which you referred to at the start of the meeting is that the ongoing financial viability of the council is to be ensured. There was a comment that a couple of comments that there was no financial impact. That is there is a financial impact. There's an annual $50,000 loss if this decision is made. It's just that in this current budget, it has been accounted for, but that does not mean that in an ongoing sense, there's not a longer term financial impact. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Harriott. Okay, I'll go back to our debate. Would anyone else like to speak to the motion? I think Mr. Councillor Adam, you're the only one. So you are speaking against or for? Sorry, I lost track.
No, for, thank you.
For,
Madam Mayor.
sure.
But a bit like Councillor Osvari, yeah, look, there's been good points made both sides of this argument. However, if it does become the disaster that some are saying, well, I'm sure we can readdress it again. And Councillor Patterson mentioned people pulling in, not finding a park, coming back onto a major highway. Yes, that can be a problem as well. However, many years ago, there used to be a digital sign at the front of that car park that indicated how many spare parks were available or not. Now, I don't know whether that's still there or it's not working, but I don't think it's been working for quite a while. I would have thought reinstating that sign would certainly go a long way to preventing any mishaps in respect to people pulling in, trying to turn around. It is awkward in there to try sometimes because it's a shared area with pedestrians. But, however, with a sign in there, we'll look at it. We'll make it free park. If it does become a real basket case in 12 months or so, or whatever the time frame is, I'm sure even the people who are supporting it, like myself, may then look at it with a different lens. But for the moment, I will support it.
Right, thank you. With that, I'll go back to Councillor O'Keefe. Would you like to use your right of reply?
Oh, yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would. I'm not on mute. Yeah, look, I disagree. I think, when we look at the results of the December-January free parking trial, which did include off-street and on-street parking, we did hear significant opportunity and benefit to the businesses. We are faced also with COVID, not that this is around my decision, but more than ever, I think we need to really make sure that we can support the business community. We also need to note, and I note, that the parking reference group recommendation to council was that it did become off-street free parking. So, we put these reference groups together for a purpose, and that's to give council information and to bring it to council what the recommendation is. And as I said, the parking reference group recommendation was that we do have this as free parking and free off-street parking. So, I absolutely think that it's timed parking. Other cities do it. Other cities have free parking across the board and they tend to, thrive. So, I think it's a fairly bad sort of suggestion in a sense to say that this is bad for our community, bad for our CBD. I mean, to me, this is an opportunity to get more people back into the CBD, and that's what we're going to be needing to be doing more than ever right now, is to try and get people, great if we have congestion, great if we have a problem with too many people coming in to the CBD. To me, that's a positive outcome. So, yeah, absolutely think this is not a disadvantage to business in the CBD. It's an advantage to get people in there and to have enforcement. Of course, we still have timed parking. And the other off-street car parks, they're not filling up. They haven't been in the past. I think we need to try and get the CBD attractive again, and we need to get people back in there. And I think this is one of those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. With that, we now go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay. Those against? Motion carried. Thank you.
7.2, I couldn't see.
Yes, 7.2.
All right, now we'll go to item number 10.4 on page 71. Again, I'll invite Mr. Peter Harriet to make some opening comments around clarification on this agenda item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As per our earlier discussion about the minutes, this agenda item also needs to be corrected in relation to the words matter. There are 3 references to matter and they should be replaced with motion. So in the heading, lifting the matter from the table should be lifting the motion from the table. And there's a record of the previous motion from Councillor Adam. As per the correction to the minutes, that should be that the motion lay on the table. And the actual recommendation that's provided in this report should be that the council resolve to take the motion from the table, not the matter. Another item is that the report should have included the recommendation from the previous meeting, but that is on the following page, on page 72 in item 10.5, which will become irrelevant once if this is dealt with. But if you wish to refer to the previous motion, which is the motion that's being asked to put back on the table, that's it there, the 4-part motion. And when we do the minutes, we will actually include that in 10.4 as well. So, Madam Mayor, I refer you to back to 10.4 and the recommendation that's there with those amendments.
Thank you, Mr. Harriet. So item 10.4, adoption of Shepparton and Mooroopna 2050 Regional City Growth Plan, lifting the motion from the table. There is a recommendation on page 71 with the amendment that the motion lay on the table until the August 2020 council meeting. And the recommendation is that the council resolve to take the motion from the table. Do I have a mover? Councillor Adam, you're on mute.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The recommendation that the council resolve to take the motion from the table, I'd like to move that.
And a seconder? Councillor Summer?
I'll second the procedural motion that we take the motion off the table.
Thank you. So this being the procedural motion, we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed, which means that the original motion is now off the table. And the original motion was moved by Councillor Giovanetti and seconded by Councillor Dennis Patterson. The original motion included is on page 72 with four points in that. I'm just referring to that original motion. We'll now open the debate on this original motion, which is now off the table. Councillor Giovanetti, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't wish to speak to the motion or against the motion at this stage. I moved the motion originally to start this issue off. I reserve the right to speak later in the meeting.
Okay, thank you. In that case, Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
I would also like to reserve my right to speak later on. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'll just make a note quickly.
Point
in
of
that case, we'll go
clarification, Madam Mayor, point of clarification.
Sure.
Can the mover of the motion reserve their right? I just need to clarify.
I'll have to consult our governance.
I don't think there's anything in the local law that talks about that, is there, Darren? Yeah.
So the mover can reserve the right to speak later.
What section is that? See?
Do you want to adjourn for 5 minutes.
No, we just refer it.
Just give us a couple of minutes. Governance is checking. Silent.
I think it's been an adopted practice by one councillor in particular, but there's nothing actually in the local law that talks about it.
So the local law is silent on whether a mover can have a reserve right to speak later. In that case, I'll move on to. We'll proceed with this debate. So if anyone else, any other councillor want to speak against the motion, because we have covered 2, now we are going to against. Yeah, so that's the cycle. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to speak against the motion. I'm not comfortable with the 2050 Regional City Growth Plan being pushed through council at this time. I don't understand the requirement that it must be passed because there are developers, agricultural consultants, etc., waiting to go, and the VPA and the government will walk away. I just don't understand why that would be. We're still working with the 2030 plan, and it was stated that there's plenty of land for the next 15 years, so why the rush? Excuse me. I've been told that this isn't the time to make fundamental changes to the document. It would be a planning scheme amendment hearing, but my information is that this would only allow for minor changes. Sorry about that.
Right.
In the past few weeks, new information has come to my attention and answers haven't been forthcoming when requested. I'm not convinced that the process has been fair and reasonable during consultation for this very large project. There was no engagement process with many of the residents. This 2050 plan is the document that will inform land use planning and growth corridors and infrastructure for the next 30 years. As a councillor, I have to be convinced that the community has confidence in our decisions and that they're fair and transparent for the whole of the municipality. And with this plan, I believe that there are glaring opportunities that have been missed, and for this reason, I would like to defer, well, I can't defer the decision, can I? But I would like to if I can. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Well, the original motion, you're speaking against the motion, and the motion doesn't mention anything about deferral of this motion.
No, but I'll reserve my right to defer the motion if it's defeated.
Through which process, Councillor Sutton? I want some clarification.
Let us speak.
If this motion doesn't get through, I'd like to defer a motion. So it'll be a foreshadowed motion.
Okay. Foreshadow motion to
defer. The decision on this for 3 months.
Okay. So if this motion is lost, you would like to consider this foreshadow motion, which says defer this motion
for 3 months.
For 3 months.
After more extended community consultation, so more of the community can actually get to see this.
All right, I think we need to, thanks. We have noted that, and we'll come back to that foreshadow motion in case this motion is lost. So we'll move on with carry on with the debate on this original motion. And Councillor Sutton, you have spoken against this motion. So I would invite any councillor who would like to speak for the motion. Councillor Hazelman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a difficult one in that there's been a process undertaken over a good 2 years' work with council, our partners, the Victorian Planning Authority, various consultants, and yet at this late stage we talk about deferral, and you wonder what deferral means. I think if you're going to put deferral on the table, you need to find a process that's going to be incorporated in that we know exactly what deferral means. I think we do run a real risk if it's just we're going to defer it for 3 months and we've got some vague notion of another consultation process, then we do run the real risk of our partner, the Victorian Planning Authority, walking away, but potentially also, and through their very astute and aggressive Chairman, Stuart Morris QC, making a direct approach to the government for the Minister to call this in and take it away from us. That's a real risk that we do run. And that's happened previously in other councils. The notion that we're going to go to another consultation process, potentially with a narrow and select group, really opens up the question of procedural fairness. You cannot provide to one section what you're not providing to all. That just simply doesn't pass the pub test, and certainly wouldn't pass scrutiny at a government level, or even at a regional planning authority level, at our regional people. And if we were talking about diverging significantly away from the plan, we bring back into play all the other statutory partners we have here, Goulburn Valley Water, Goulburn Murray Water, Catchment Management Authority, who have given this plan to date a tick. If you diverge from this, you're going back into that process again as well. So there's some sharks in the water if you want to diverge from what we're doing. And what I've said on many occasions is that adoption of this plan in many ways simply opens the batting. It's one stage. The next phase of this project would be, if it's adopted, we would go to the planning scheme amendment phase. Again, potentially consultants pulled in to draw that documentation together. Again, it's more consultation. It's an open, transparent, public process of submissions. People would have the opportunity to directly address council at that stage, which is usually the caper in planning scheme amendments. And the opportunity for change would certainly exist. It has existed, and we've all experienced planning scheme amendments where change has occurred. Following the planning scheme amendment phase, we'd be off then potentially to Panels Victoria. Whatever we were recommending would have to pass scrutiny at an independent panel, not being run by us, independent people, where again, interested parties could make submissions, be heard in person, and then Panels Victoria, at the conclusion of that process, would make a recommendation back to council, and then council would consider that again, and then finally that recommendation or a recommendation would go to the minister.
Your time is over. Do you want an extension of time?
Yes, please.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay, please carry on.
At the conclusion of the panels phase, it would need to head off through the regional planning authority through to the minister, and finally for ministerial approval. And the sorts of things that we're talking about, heading off for a deferral, heading off into other parts of the community, asking different questions here and there, simply will not pass scrutiny in that process. We've got a process now that's tried and true. It's been tested over the years, whereby the public gets an opportunity to be a component of it. Am I suggesting this plan is the answer to everything? No, I'm not. There will be flaws in this process. No doubt there will be. But the planning scheme and the Panels Victoria, it's a long process. There's checks and balances in the process, and it provides the opportunity to find flaws and correct anomalies. But most of all, it gives local people the opportunity to participate in those processes. If the VPA decide to head off to the minister and seek this calling in, our local people have lost any opportunity to influence this outcome, and that would be a disaster for them.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. So I'll carry on with this debate. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Summer.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think it would be a disaster to not have a 2050 strategy at all, but anyway, I think we should realise this began in 2017. That's 2 or 3 years ago, and a lot has changed since then. We now have a super school that might service 3,000 students, and there's a lot of land out there that would make sense to rezone as residential. And the report that I've seen, it only mentions the super school in terms of traffic management, not in a land use capacity. We also now have a climate emergency, and that has not been applied to the document either. These are two major things that I think it's missing. We're talking about well into the future here. And when we first flagged this project, we did anticipate there'd be things in there that we could never have guessed at the time, and that is happening, and that has happened. And I think for that reason there could be substantial changes that would have better outcomes for the community if we just sat down and applied the rationale of what is actually happening in the world. Now, if we do adopt this, I do appreciate there is a process and there will be opportunities for people to have more input. But if we adopt this, this is our position. That will hold a lot of weight when it comes to any panel. We have a plethora of lawyers behind us, and as we've just heard, a lot of very powerful people pushing for this to be adopted. Now, Mr. and Mrs. Average Joe Blow, who want a retirement lot, are going to find it pretty hard to argue the case when it comes to any of those panels. So I think a fair process, which is often mentioned here, would be going back and having another look. Now, I don't think that needs to be in 3 months. I actually think that can be pushed back 1 or 2 or even 3 years. It is a 2050 document. It is not urgent. We have things that are pressing right now. People are more concerned about getting to 2021 at this stage. I don't think we need to consider this as urgent. We just need to consider what's happened, listen to the community who obviously didn't feel heard in the consultation process, take a step back and redo it for the best outcomes of our community.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Patterson?
Yes, I'll make a comment. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Regarding Councillor Summers, Mr. Average, Mrs. Average live out Shepparton. They also live at Marupna. They also live at Coelho. They also live in North Shepparton. They're involved in this. You know, we can't keep going back and revisiting things. The super school, you're saying, is now a part of the plan. Well, another 3 years, there could be a university somewhere else, and that's a part of the plan. It's a continuing document, but we have to set the parameters right. The CMA, Catchment Management Authority, with their flood overlay, most of that area is, you can't build on it anyway. And this is very early in the process. Referring to what Councillor Hazeman said, this is opening the batting. Well, I'd go back a step further. This is rolling the wicket to get it nice and flat so everyone can play the game evenly. So this is a starting point for the community to get involved. So I just think we need to pursue this. I know there's people out there I know, and you know, the land out there for rural is valued at $5,000 a hectare. Residential is $50,000 a hectare. So I can understand these people wanting to develop in their future. It's their superannuation. But we just have to be very conscious. We are responsible for the whole planning scheme of Greater Shepparton. We have to make the decisions for everybody. I think very relevant was the last few months has been a development at Gilliston where there was one house, had the potential to stop 100 job abattoirs going up because of bad planning. We have to overcome that. We have to keep agricultural and residential separated. Otherwise, there's arguments about spray drift. There's arguments about scare guns and hail guns. We have to keep them separated. As councillors, it's terrific to go to functions and smile at everyone and you know, not have to make a decision. But sometimes we have to make hard decisions. May hurt. We know we're hurting people who make those decisions, but we have to make them. This is only making a decision for the first step. There's lots of steps to come, and I believe justice will be served in the long run, and may it continue, and I support this plan.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Summer, what would you like to say?
I would just like a point of...
Is there a point of clarity?
Yeah. Yes. I just want to clarify, 2050 plans, does every council have a 2050 plan? We have a 2030, but is it standard and a requirement to have a 2050 plan?
So you're asking, this is your point of clarification? Would you like this, Mr. Peter Harriott, to reply to this question that you have?
Somebody who knows that would be great.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Summer. I'm sure many councillors would love to be in the position of having the VPA, Victorian Planning Authority, having supported them to prepare a long-term strategic planning document such as 2050. Not every council would be in that position that they have them, but those that do will appreciate them, and it really does set you up for long-term planning in the future under many aspects of the planning scheme, just for urban development and rural development of your municipality. So they're a sought-after document, but not everybody would have them.
Thank you, Mr. Harriet. Okay, so we'll carry on with our debate. Thank you, Councillor Patterson, for speaking in support. And now we'll go to those who want to speak against the motion. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Giovanetti. So, Councillor Giovanetti, my understanding is that you are the mover of this motion, and a mover is someone who supports the motion.
As I said at the start of the meeting, start of the motion, Madam Mayor, I moved the motion so that the issue could be discussed. I didn't state at any stage during that process that I was in favour of the motion.
You can talk.
Okay, all right, carry on.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Procedural fairness is thrown around a fair bit, and I totally agree with it. I think where we have some issues is in the community consultation phase of this process. We all know councils criticise on many occasions for their community consultation. Often I think we do a reasonable job, but in this case I think that we probably haven't. I think that a number of people have been consulted, I don't deny that, but I don't think all of the participants in the various areas have been consulted. And I, as a councillor, would like to get the opinion of the people who are to be affected. If I'm going to make a decision on a 2050 plan, I don't think I can make an informed decision unless I know all sides of the story. Now, I'm not suggesting the VPA or anyone else hasn't done a good job, but I would like to hear from the community members that are going to be affected. And I think that procedural fairness obviously means that it's not open for just the people who are against what has been proposed, but open it to all parties. And if we have a period of consultation and when we allow 3 months for this matter to be decided, comes back to council, whatever the decision whatever the decision we make at that stage is, well, that is it.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Giovanetti. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Yes, Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And look, it's actually really difficult because there is an opportunity for the landowners to take this to a panel, actually objection or have put their case forward. But one of my main arguments has always been, how can we not consider the growth of North Shepparton with the super school? I mean, it links together. I mean, we're looking at this incredible growth across our region anyway over the next 5, 10, 20, 30, 50 years. I mean, what does that mean? It's going to mean hopefully that people will use this education facility and want to perhaps live closer to it. I mean, historically, that's what people tend to want to do. So not to have had any consideration with what has happened historically with our education system, historically with our secondary schools, where this is placed right up the north end, where we're looking and we're discussing land development. I just think it needed to be considered. And I do have to agree with some of the council laws that we haven't had that opportunity to perhaps hear all the facts. We've read everything, we've been given everything, but from the objectors, I think there hasn't been perhaps the broad enough opportunity to perhaps engage with them. So this is the only reason I'm going against it tonight, because I think, as always, that all members of the community need to be heard. And if they feel they haven't, we have to listen to that. And we have to make sure that we do the right thing and perhaps, really get together and work out what's the best way moving forward. But there is an opportunity, for them to take it to the panel. So I'm in two minds about that. Yeah, they're better off to do that because that process is much tighter. They can, they can look at the document, they can take it and object to it. yeah, it's difficult. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Cave. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Adam?
I was unmuted. I muted myself. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, this is a really sticky situation here. But look, first, let me express how important I think the 2050 strategy is to current and future residents of Greater Shepparton by simply saying that this proposed plan of where we will live and work is intrinsically linked to how we will live and work into the future. As part of the required process, this council has devoted a lot of time and effort into producing a plan that reflects community expectations of future residential and industrial land development expansion within a municipality. Along with the Victorian Planning Authority's part funding, this council has engaged consultants to provide an opinion based on data and input derived from experts and stakeholders from the community. Unfortunately, as is the case with many community consultation exercises, many stakeholders claim that the process has failed them when their particular expectations are not met. I get that. However, not all of these grievances can be categorised this way, in my opinion. In this instance, the exclusion of parts of Shepparton East from any form of development in the 2050 growth plan seems illogical and contrary to a structured and sequential growth of Shepparton. Issues such as poor drainage, to me, don't seem unsurmountable, as nearly all new developments require some form of drainage mitigation. That's the same for whether it be north, south, east or west. Madam Mayor, the fifth largest city in Victoria, Greater Shepparton, continues to hug the shoulders of the GB highway with seemingly little consideration to distancing its residents from not only the CBD, but now distancing itself from the single largest school project in Shepparton's history. I don't seek to exclude any areas from development, and I don't object to the overall recommendations of this 2050 strategy. But to be clear, I'm just here to try and have the vast or the wider community's voices heard. Over the past month, myself and many other councillors have received communications from many citizens expressing similar concerns about the 2050 plan and the glaring exclusion of the closest potential residential site to the new super school currently under construction. I accept that the existing consultation and process has led us to this point here tonight, and that's been, the boxes have been ticked all the way. But I wish to remind councillors that this OCM meeting tonight is also a statutory part of this process. The council staff have diligently produced reports and studies that help them form opinions, which in turn translate into recommendations to this council for consideration. However, as elected representatives, to ignore concerns, however late in the process, would be arrogant towards and ignorant of the many voices expressing concern within our community. I don't support adopting this strategy at this point. However, Councillor Sutton's foreshadowed motion, I would certainly support that if that comes into play.
Councillor Adam, your time is over. Do you want an extension?
About 20 seconds, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Is everyone okay with that? Okay, carry on.
So as a council, we seek to provide stakeholders with confidence and clear direction in their respective plans, whether that be development opportunities or home buying decisions. And as such, to address and resolve, if possible, these concerns now, to me, is preferable to addressing them at a future panel hearing prior as part of a planning scheme amendment application. As Councillor Summer noted, if this does get to a planning scheme amendment panel somewhere down the track in 18 months' time, the difference between the previous consultations and the planning panel's hearings is that they will have a position to fall back on, which is our council decision to adopt. I'm not saying this may not be adopted in 3 months. It may be after we've unpacked all the information we need to. So that's my position at this point. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. I think everybody has spoken, and I'll take, Councillor Aswari.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, I'm speaking against the motion purely and simply on the basis of the fact that being held out to say that the Victorian Planning Authority might withdraw support and it would be taken over by the government, and that the council would lose its position in negotiating and managing this. Well, that's something that is not an isolated case, because it's come up over the journey of 8 years. The flood study, other planning amendments, the Greyhound precinct, on and on and on. I think, as a number of my fellow councillors have pointed out, and I take note that Councillor Patterson has previously mentioned that there are going to be winners and losers, and we have to make decisions. Well, yes, we have to make decisions, but ultimately we're elected by our residents and our ratepayers, and I have to be satisfied in my own mind that I'm making an informed decision, and that ultimately, if the decision is made that we've got it wrong, well, I can live with that, but at least we've gone out to that necessary next step and manage it in a more effective way. And I can look at people in the street and say, yes, I looked at this, but I also listened to what other people who sent other messages to me later in the piece and said, look, this is not being done on a fair and equitable basis. I think I support the strategy. I just want to be 100% clear that we're doing it the right way. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aswari. And with that, I think everybody has spoken. I would also like to take this opportunity. I would be speaking in support of this motion after hearing from everyone. And look, I do understand that there are concerns. However, the growth plan, it takes into account strategic justifications and significant planning outcomes and principles for the growth of Shepparton and Mooroopna in the next 30 years. As opposed to a single view around some impacted landholders. It might appear that by leaving this matter or by deferring this matter for some months could result in favourable outcome for one particular impacted landholders, group of landholders. However, my understanding is that the reality is that if it is deferred, it will be a longer process for all parties to come to a decision. If it's deferred for one group to provide their submission again, the procedural fairness of the process could not be protected and it will be compromised. This act of council can be seen as compromising the good governance of the process, whereby one particular group of landholders is given advantage over other impacted groups. The process of 2050 growth plan will have to start from scratch most likely, or will have to go back a few stages, meaning that first of all, as we've all heard, $250,000 of investment from the VPA plus other investment in terms of time and effort would be lost. Victorian Planning Authority most likely will not provide this funding support again, and council will have to fund this project out of its own expenses. It may take another 1 or 2 years before the matter comes back to the table again, with a similar outcome in that round, that some other parties might be impacted and they would consider themselves as losers. So where does this really leave everyone? So in my opinion, in the best interest of all stakeholders, all parties, it would be better to allow to continue with the process, which will allow further opportunities to everyone to address their concerns. As Councillor Hazelman has noted, through other stages of this project, such as planning scheme amendments and subsequent independent panels, Victoria. And as we all know, it is not council's decision to rezone, it is the decision of planning minister. And if we get to that stage quicker, it would be beneficial for all impacted parties. That's how I see it, and that's why I'm supporting this motion. So with that,
Madam Mayor, can I have a point of clarity, please, that the discussion was broader than just one group of landowners? It was much broader than just, you're suggesting that the decision tonight was around one group of landowners. That is definitely not correct. The conversation was much broader than that.
Okay, point noted. So if I should have, I probably meant to include the group of impacted landholders or anyone else. So I'm taking their point. However, the outcome is, again, in my understanding, it is that today there are two or three sectors of our community, two or three main stakeholders. But in the next process, there could be others, not the ones who are in this time impacted, but others could be impacted negatively in the second process, in the second round. So my question is just, how far does this process go on? Because every time there will be someone who will not be when I say someone, I mean some parts of our community who will not be satisfied with this process. So is it not better to take this process to the next stage rather than going back 2 or 3 years and coming back to the same position as we are today? And also in the best interest of good governance and not compromising the procedural fairness, perhaps give everybody an opportunity to move on to the next stage. Thank you. Okay. So thank you for all the inputs. With that, I think we are now ready to go for the vote. Everybody has spoken. Those in favor? Okay. Those against? Okay. So motion is lost.
What's the vote, sir?
3-5.
3-5.
Johnny?
3-5.
8.
3-5.
Sorry, 3-6. 3-6. 3-6.
Sorry, no, I can't count.
Sorry, I was also counting. So 3-6. So this motion is lost, which means that we can now consider the foreshadow motion. Councillor Sutton, would you like to state your foreshadow motion, your motion, and so that
My motion is,
discuss that.
My motion is, Madam Mayor, that I would like to move a motion to defer the adoption of the Shepparton and Maribna 2050 Regional City Growth Plan and for 3 months until November.
Does it need more sort of some elaboration in terms of differ, in terms of the process? What does it include? Or maybe you can speak to the motion and clarify this.
Well, I'd like to include that we have some extended consultation with the Greater Shepparton City community, rather than just a few different landholders, because it's not only the landholders that have been speaking about this, it's more the greater community who have been speaking about it, and they haven't had a chance to learn about the 2050 plan, and I think that we need extended consultation that will take in those people that haven't known about it and haven't been consulted.
Okay, I just need to understand whether we have captured that motion, or do we want more precise motion, and then rest of the comments can come through the debate? Is that the?
It would be easier, at least that motion that we can write down.
We understand the motion, but if you're asking if it needs further explanation, obviously it needs further explanation.
Yeah, so we'll, so that's the.
I mean, we're talking, sorry, Seema.
In the interest of understanding this motion that Councillor Sutton has put forward, I believe it's important that we get some better clarification and some comments from Mr. Harriet around this particular foreshadow motion and its impacts.
Madam Mayor, I've got to talk about the risk associated with this motion. The governance principles, again, at the start say the transparency of council decisions, actions and information is to be ensured. I'm very concerned about the risk of the transparency surrounding this proposed motion. Council adopted a consultation process for 2050. It was a serious consultation process. They adopted that at the start of the process, and now we're trying to develop a new consultation process at a council meeting without any idea of where we're going to go. Now, this is a risk, okay? You're telling me in the next 3 months that I'm to do some sort of consultation process. We don't know whether it's the whole community. Is it 2050 back out there for full consultation, or is it a component of the community?
Okay, Mr. Harriet.
I need clarification around this, because potentially we do not have 2050 going back out on exhibition, okay? This could be abandon 2050 and start again. So
okay, thanks for that clarification. So if you all understand.
I'm not asking for it to be abandoned. I'm asking for it to be deferred, and I'll say for 6 months, that'll give you some more time, Peter, deferred for 6 months and for extended consultation with the Greater Shepparton community on what the 2050 plan involves.
All right, Councillor Sutton,
I've got to mention procedural fairness, Madam Mayor.
We have to.
Procedural fairness. This council is at risk, serious risk in relation to procedural fairness surrounding what's being proposed.
How is it unfair?
All right, I think we need to, we just capture, hang on, there's a procedure to follow. So I'm recording, I'm noting down Councillor Sutton's motion as a foreshadow, which was a foreshadow motion, but now it's a motion under discussion. Councillor Summer, do you have a point of clarification?
No, I'd actually like to foreshadow a motion as well.
We need a seconder for Councillor Sutton's motion.
Can I say
first?
what my...
What is
And
the
then,
motion?
and then I can note down your foreshadow motion.
Madam Mayor, can I have a point of clarification?
Yes, Councillor Sutton, Councillor Patterson.
Why hasn't Councillor Sutton's original motion been accepted that she would ask the council to defer a decision for 3 months? That's all. That's what it was. And that's what we should vote on.
Yes, that's the.
Hasn't been seconded.
It hasn't been seconded yet, but just I'm repeating, Councillor, and thanks, Councillor Patterson, for your clarification. But yes, it is the motion that Councillor Sutton has put forward, which is about, which says to defer the motion for 3 months. Am I right, Councillor Sutton?
Well, I said, and then Peter said that's too short. So I said 6 months.
6 months. Sorry, pardon me, I didn't hear that. 6 months, and that's the whole motion. Defer it for 6 months.
Can I read out
To
what
allow
that's
time
the motion?
to allow time for extended consultation with the Greater Shepparton community.
To allow time for extended consultation with Greater Shepparton community.
Yes.
Okay, and so we need a seconder. Councillor Adam.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll support that motion.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sutton. Sorry, Councillor Summer, you raised another foreshadow motion.
I did. Quite like the wording of the last motion, though. I just thought we'd take the time limit out of it and just say that the council recommence community consultation for the Greater Shepparton 2050 plan. Just go back out there.
All right, noted. We'll go back to this discussion or debate around Councillor Sutton's motion. We have a seconder, Councillor Adam. Councillor Sutton, do you want to speak to your motion? And if you could elaborate certain details of this motion in terms of when you say defer, I would like to know what does that defer include?
Well, as I said in my previous, when we first talked about it, that in the last few weeks, there's been a lot of information come through that I hadn't known about before. And it was from people in the east of Shepparton, it was from people in North Kyalla, it was from general community members who didn't know anything about this plan. So I just think, well, the consultation process wasn't robust enough because it's come back to us and they didn't know. The idea that the government's going to take it away from us, it's still our plan. We've still got it. The 2050 plan is here. It's in black and white. So we still have it. So I can't understand what is going to make a difference if it's going to be deferred for 6 months. And that, you know, people are allowed to have a say on this plan. It's a very important document, and to have it just saying, well, no, it's been out there, but they don't know it's been out there. So we have to change that. We have to be transparent. We have to provide good governance for the Greater Shepparton community. And at this stage, it just seems to be too rushed. It's 2050, so it's another 30 years away. 2030 plan started in 2006 and it was still going in 2016. So that was 10 years at least, or 11 years in the making. So, you know, this has been 18 months and it just doesn't seem to be, the right way to go.
Okay, Councillor Hazelman, you're raising your hand. Do you have a point of clarification or point of order?
No, just a clarification. I think the 2030 plan was adopted by Council in 2006, not commenced in 2006.
Well, there was a planning scheme amendment, a planning panel in 2015.
There was a variety of planning panels from work that arose out of 2030.
Oh, well, it rose and it was still going then in 2015. It was still being considered.
Not 2030 itself, it wasn't. It was adopted in 2006.
All right.
Okay, thank you for that clarification point, noted and accepted. All right, Councillor Sutton, do you want to continue? Or do you have any more comments?
No, I don't think so. I think that's about it. But I do think we need to have it sent out to the community so they can actually see what's going on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Briefly, Madam Mayor, I support Councillor Sutton's motion. As I said, this is a very complex issue from the beginning. But to say that procedural fairness comes into play, I think we're at this point because there's a perception out there that there hasn't been procedural fairness. And to say to go out to the general community, the wider community, not just the interested landholders, we're talking about everyone in Greater Shepparton to actually put their opinion forward for a plan that will actually design the look of their city for the next 30 years. To say that's not fair, I would suggest I find that hard to actually comprehend. We're not talking about going just to the particular landholders. We all know people have personal interest in their own land and to develop. That's a given. I'm talking about, and I think Councillor Sutton is saying this has got to go to everyone. Future purchasers of house, future parents of students who attend the school, future people coming to Shepparton as part of a decentralisation push that we've been on about for 10 or so years. That's what it's about. I don't think that's unfair when you ask all the community. If you only ask one portion, certainly that would become unfair. But we're going back out. Well, I hope we go back to everyone and get their opinion. Their opinions will then be obviously compared to our existing work that we've done. That doesn't throw that work into the rubbish bin. That still remains. We apply that. That's what we're asking about here. And the end result may be the same. The recommendations may come out to be exactly the same as they are. Then we'll have to make a decision to adopt or not. So that's what I've got to say on the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Yes, Councillor Hazelman.
I'll speak for the motion, but not wholeheartedly. Part of the role of council is to provide direction to the officers. I would struggle to be in Peter's shoes, arriving at his desk tomorrow morning to think, well, where do I go from here? Is consultation with the broader community? Do I engage a series of consultants and have a lot of public meetings and whatever? And in the COVID environment, might be difficult. Or is public consultation, I put an advertisement in the Shepparton News? What is council actually directing Peter to do? You know, buzzword to say, oh, we need more consultation. What does it actually look like? What's the process that we want him to undertake? The motion is absolutely silent on that matter. We just want more consultation. We'll make a decision in 6 months' time. I think as a council, we've got some responsibility to provide a bit more direction about the process. As I said, it could be we engage consultants, or we'll put an advertisement in the Shep News. That's all, and the Satura paper. That's the end of it. Is that what you're talking, or are we talking something more involved, more of a process and a procedure that gives Peter and his officers and our planning staff some direction to follow?
Okay, thank you for your comments.
Is that a question or a statement?
Bit of both, Jenny, bit of both.
Okay. You have spoken in support of this motion, Councillor Hazelman. Just keeping track of the cycle. Now I'm going to ask any councillor who is wanting to speak against the motion. Yes, Councillor Summer.
I just don't think we should be locking ourselves into a time limit. There are people who are waiting on a result, and the plan doesn't technically exist until we endorse it. It might be there, but it's not something we can refer to until it has a council stamp of approval. So this consultation process might be quite quick, it might be brief, or it might be more involved depending on what kind of feedback we get. Now, as councillors, it's not our role to decide operational matters like how should the consultation proceed. We are here at a high level saying there hasn't been enough, and it's up to the organisation to satisfy the councillors who are finally making the decision about whether or not it's been satisfactory. The CEO and staff are used to this. They have knockbacks all the time when it gets to a meeting. They are used to it. It is not something that we should be ashamed of, something that we need to change our minds about, because we don't want to hurt someone's feelings. This is the future of Shepparton. It needs to be right. Now, I just find it astonishing. I did look online and found out about the 2006. There was a 2006 to 2030 plan, and it was updated in 2016. This also will be a working document that is updated every few years. I just don't think that now, in such a time of flux, we should be doing anything like this. I think it needs to be postponed for years. That's my opinion.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Summer. So you have spoken against. I'll again go back to councillors who want to speak for the motion. Does anyone want to speak for the motion? Okay. Does anyone want to speak against the motion? Okay. Yes, Councillor Patterson.
I just want to speak. It's irrelevant with for or it's against. There's 37 people at present are feeling pretty neglected. They have come to council and they've had their say. 37 submissions we received, which is more than normal. Now we're just wiping them. We've got ourselves in a real hole here. I don't know where we're going. Honestly, I don't. If you ask me to vote on something, I don't know what I'm voting on. I don't know what to expect. I don't know how we're going to have consultation. Are we going, how far back we're going? And when we have consultation, we get to a meeting after that and someone rings up a council the day before and says, I wasn't consulted. We go back again. You know, get to a stage where to make a decision. We've got to show some leadership. You know, this is, you know, there's always going to be people unhappy with the decision we made. We can't keep going back. It's as simple as that.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Patterson. So Councillor Sutton, okay, I'll just make my comments. Still not sure whether it's against or for, because it really does not matter. The original motion has been lost. And if the motion that we are now discussing is about deferring it for a number of months, losing that motion, or if the motion is carried, what does it mean? It's the lack of direction to our council staff and to the CEO about what next. And as Councillor Patterson has noted, the consultation process, I mean, I absolutely want to support that transparency in the consultation process, but the consultation process was held. And if they have to do it again, it will be done again. And it might have 37 other submissions. So we will always be in that cycle. Anyway, those are my comments. These are the comments from my original motion as well. Now we are at this stage where we have this motion put forward by Councillor Sutton, and we just have to go for a vote. Having said that, we, you know, either way, it's a total lack of direction that we are providing to our CEO in respect of what next. So with those comments, I will we'll go for the vote. Those in, Councillor Sutton, I'll give you that right of reply, given that we had.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This process, I mean, a consultation, you can do it multiple ways. So I'll leave that up to the CEO to decide which way they want to do it, but it's got to include the whole of Greater Shepparton, the whole municipality. This is a very important document. 2050 is 30 years away, and this is going to guide the way our town will be built. And so it needs to be more than just landholders need to be looking at it. There needs to be everybody in the community. So they'll all have a reason that they'll want to see what's going on. And
there's a point of clarification, Councillor Sutton. I would like to ask you about when you say that this has to be for the whole municipality. Is the assumption that the previous round did not include? And because our understanding is that the process-wise it did include, and everybody was welcome to make submissions.
Well, I don't think it went wide enough. Yes, because people that have spoken to me said they didn't know anything about it. So, you know, it wasn't widely advertised, obviously, because they didn't know. They didn't know that it was on. And I don't think this is the first time the consultation process has failed. I think it fails quite often because people don't know about things. So we have to know, perhaps we have to devise a new way of doing consultations. I hear it all the time.
Okay, please carry on with your closing comments.
So I'm calling for consultation for the wider community because it's an important document that needs to be agreed to by the overall majority of the community, not just a few people.
Thank you. So I think we have covered everyone. Am I right to understand? No, there's no councillor who wants to speak against or for. Okay. We'll now go to the vote. Those in support of, or those in favor of this motion? So we have, okay, those against this motion? So against is, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 are against and 2,
5.
5 are in favor. Thank you, Councillor Adam. It seems that
My pleasure.
I needed that help. Thank you. So motion, yes, Councillor Sutton, you are on mute.
Could I have a division, please?
Okay. Those in favor? Councillor Sutton, Councillor Giovanetti, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Adam, Councillor Summer. Those against? Councillor Hazelman, Councillor Orisvari, Councillor Patterson, and Councillor Abdullah. Motion carried. Okay, thank you. All right, so with that, we'll now move on to item number 10.6 on page 82. This is about Freedom Food Land Sale. Any councillor like to move a motion, please? Councillor Patterson? You're on mute, Councillor Patterson. You're on mute. Could you please unmute yourself? Thank you.
Sorry, I spoke earlier about an automatic unmute button. I'm just verifying. Yeah, I'd like to move the motion on page 82. Thank you. Would you like me to read it out?
Yeah, up to you if you want to.
No, we'll see. Everyone can see it. It's very straightforward.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Councillor Aswari.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Support the recommendation, or second the recommendation, I suppose.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, just very quickly. This is a lot easier than the last one. This is basically supporting a very big employer in the region. They need some more land to make them fire compliant with one of their sheds, and we're happy to do that at a price that is realistic. It's all been done by licensed valuers, and we're moving some land on to Freedom Foods, and they've been a very good supporter of council, and we need to keep supporting businesses like this. So it's a pleasure to be able to help them out.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Aswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? No? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? All right, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Moving on to item number 11.1 on page 86, final Kangapna Recreation Reserve Master Plan. There's a recommendation on page 86. Would a councillor please move a motion? Councillor Giovanetti.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move the recommendation on page 86. That is that the council adopt the Kangapna Recreation Reserve Master Plan.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to second that motion. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Giovanetti, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mayor, this is quite an exciting process that Kangapna Recreation Reserve are going to be going through. It's going to improve the facilities that they have for their community out there considerably. There's a landscape master plan that's going to be undertaken, and there's going to be works done on the heating and cooling of their facilities, toilet upgrades and compliance, improving the football change rooms, have an electronic scoreboard installed, which will be, I'm sure, very welcome. A new community change room and club room facility, and an oval and netball court lighting. They are some of the works that are going to be undertaken, and I think it's, I haven't been at the Kangapna Footy Club for a while, but I was there probably 20 years ago, and it needed a fair bit of work then, so I'm sure it still does.
Thank you, Councillor Giovanetti. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I have actually been out there, I think about 18 months ago. There was a couple of big events when I was mayor, and it definitely needs a very big overhaul. So I was very happy to see these works progressing, that will be progressing. I'm sure that the Kangapna community and all their sporting people that are using this facility will be very, very happy about this, because it really was becoming almost not a usable facility. So we need to continue to support all of our sporting facilities, but also, you know, communities that see things that contribute to their community. So yeah, absolutely behind this one. It'll be a great benefit once it's completed.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? All right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Okay, so next is item 11.2, award of contract 1995, design and construction of sale yard spend renewal. There's a recommendation on page 90. Would anyone, okay, Councillor Adam, you want to move the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thought Councillor Osmar was waving at me there for a moment. This, Madam Mayor, on page 90, the recommendation is that the council accept the tender submitted by Proway Livestock Equipment for contract number 1995, design and construct of renewal stock pens at Shepparton sale yards for the lump sum of $656,430.64, including GST, 8.2, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal the contract documents.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Patterson?
I will second it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Edo, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, look, this issue was identified well over 12 months ago by the committee, which I'm a part of. And yes, we thought we could get away with this with some minor repairs, but unfortunately, after a more extensive inspection, we had to do quite a lot more work than we expected. So it is a lot of money. However, I think, as was alluded to earlier in tonight's meeting, the sale yards are actually one of the few parts of council that actually creates income, a positive income at least. So we have the money to spend on it. We need to do it to secure our existing extent in respect to how many sales we do and the amount of stock we can take. So it's a good decision. It needs to be done, and I hope we can do it as quick as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think Councillor Adam nailed it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Councillor Summer?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to speak to the motion, not necessarily for or against.
To the motion. Okay.
Just that we are a growing city and inevitably we will be building up density around that area in that location. We're lucky we haven't had too many complaints so far, but we're talking about animals in cages and the smells and the issues that come from that. And we spoke about this with the land separation required for agricultural and residential in our planning zone. So this is a substantial amount of money. It wasn't supposed to be this much money, but we went in, began the works, and then it became a more extensive job than we imagined. So for that reason, I support it. It's about the well-being of the livestock, but it would be possibly a better outcome if we were to use that much money to investigate a greenfield site away from the Shepparton Central District, I think, or maybe even question, is this a core council business? Perhaps we should be looking at expressions of interest for prospective business partners so that we can reduce our need to resource things. I think they've done an amazing job out there, and it is getting quite competitive, and it's but in terms of these works, so let's stick to topic, I do think it's required. It's just that it's a lot of money, and it's a lot of money going to one location that may not be the most appropriate moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion?
Madam Mayor, just a point of clarification. Was Councillor Summer speaking for or against? Two. So then that means I wouldn't have a right of reply because you've not gone one way or the other. Very clever. Thank you, Councillor.
Okay.
Good point. I'll use that.
All right, thank you. So we don't have anyone else wanting to speak to the motion? No? All right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Next is item number 12.1.1, Councillor Activity Report July 2020. There's a recommendation on page 94. Would any councillor like to move a motion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation that the summary of the Council Laws Community Interaction and Briefing Program be received and record of assemblies of councillors be noted.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hazelman. Thanks. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
To second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just very briefly, obviously the list is getting shorter. We're doing things in a different way. We're obviously doing lots of Zoom meetings and trying to participate as much as we can with this new way of life. I think the biggest thing I'm missing is obviously that face-to-face interaction. But I think we're doing a good job as far as keeping that community connectivity happening, which is crucial at this point of time. as I said, just a new way of doing things, and we're all getting used to that. But I'm certainly looking forward to the time when council laws and we can get back out amongst the community and obviously being more present. But I think the community also needs to know and be reminded that we can be contacted at any time, and we certainly, that is happening. But to continue that, you know, I don't care what it's about, just if you feel like a chat about what's happening at the moment within our council law roles or whatever it may be, I think it's very important that we all stay very connected to the community. We've been elected by the community, and we are certainly here for them during this interesting COVID-19 time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, Madam Mayor, I think Councillor O'Keefe covered it well.
Thank you. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would anyone like to speak for the motion? Anyone like to speak to the motion? No, all right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried, unopposed. Thank you. Next is item 12.2, Council Committee Reports, nil received. 12.3, Notice of Motion, Amendment or Rescission, nil received. And number 13, Documents for Signing and Sealing, nil. Moving on to item 14.1 on page 97, Designation of Confidentiality of Information, Report Attachments. There is a recommendation. Would a councillor like
Madam Mayor,
yes.
sorry, Madam Mayor,
Oh.
just a point. This is a point of clarification. It's not very important, but on not 12.3, Notice of Motion, Amendment or Recession, should that be recession or rescission?
Rescission. Thank you for noting. There's a typo here.
I've contributed something to the meeting. Carry on, thank you.
Thank you very much. There's a typo here, we'll fix it. Moving on to item 14, confidential management reports, 14.1, designation of confidentiality of information, report attachments, and the recommendation here on page 97. Would any councillor please move motion? Councillor Giovanetti.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation on page 97. I can't see the sense in reading it. We've all got a copy in front of us.
Thank you. And a second, Councillor Adam. Thank you. Councillor Giovanetti, do you want to speak to the motion?
No, no comment, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Adam, do you have any comments?
Pretty straight. Oh, sorry. It's
No,
pretty straightforward, Madam Mayor. Yeah. No.
Okay. Does anyone want to speak against the motion? Councillor Summer.
I haven't been able to access those documents in my iPad. They have not opened, and that was brought to your attention. So I feel like I should abstain from voting because I don't know what's in them. I can't check local content or anything.
Okay. Can I respond to that one? Yes. Further to your question, the advice was that you have to check, and it was working. Since it was working in the evening, it worked in the morning, and you were advised to speak to our executive assistant. But I take your point. If you have not seen that and you want to abstain from the vote,
I checked it before the meeting and it was the same. So yes, it's probably a glitch in the iPad, which is another reason why it's great we're getting laptops.
Councillor Summer, we all have a copy of this confidential report and the attachments. And if you have not been able to access it due to IT issues, I note that concern. Thank you. All right. So now, does any councillor want to speak to the motion? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried with Councillor Summer abstaining from the vote. Okay, thank you. Next is item number 15, urgent business not included on the agenda. Yes, Councillor Giovanetti.
I was just about to turn my computer off, that was all.
Okay, too soon. I think we've got another item remaining. So I just want to note that there is no urgent business item.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to second Councillor Giovanetti.
Okay, Thank you, Councillor Patterson. That brings us to item 16, which is close of meeting. So I declare this meeting closed at 7:58 today. Thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to all the viewers and listeners and councillors. Stay safe. See you next time. Bye-bye.